Hello all, and welcome back. You're in for a special treat. We don't often share our product roadmap broadly, but we're really excited about what's ahead, and we think you will be too. I would like to introduce you to Neil Kare, Director of Product Marketing at LinkedIn, who will lead our last discussion of the day of our LinkedIn Studio Session series. Hi, Neil. Go ahead and bring us home.
Thank you, Sahar. Hi, everyone. Welcome to San Francisco. We're coming to you live from our LinkedIn offices on 2nd and Howard Street. So my name is Neil Kare. I'm the head of product marketing for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and I'm really thrilled to be here and joined today by two amazing guests here with decades of experience across product and sales. So first, we have Monica Lewis, our Senior Director of Product for LinkedIn Sales Solutions. And with her, we have John Barrows, the CEO and co-founder of JB Sales, a sales training firm and the host of the Make It Happen Monday podcast. So today is all about looking ahead to the future of sales and the future of Sales Navigator. But before we get into it, we do have a tradition at LinkedIn. It's one thing that we ask everyone before meetings when we're getting to know each other, and it's a classic icebreaker, which is, what's one thing that's not on your LinkedIn profile? So John, you're the guest here. We'll start with you.
I'd probably say the one thing is me getting fired from Staples. So you always put your accomplishments on LinkedIn. You tend to avoid the times you get fired. But after my first company got acquired by Staples, I didn't exactly fit the mold of the corporate world, and I don't have much of a filter, and I really don't like playing politics. So after a little while, Staples offered me another position. They fired me, and I don't exactly highlight that on the LinkedIn profile. So,
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I don't know how you'd put that on your LinkedIn profile.
Well, quite frankly, it was one of the best things that could ever happen to me in my career. But I still don't want to promote that without context. Let's put it that way.
That's great. That's great. Monica, what about you?
Gosh, that's a hard one to follow. Mine, I'll do a throwback to my childhood. I was born left-handed and then spontaneously swapped to being right-handed. And I joke, left brain, right brain. I'm not sure how much grounding there is, but I'm a little sciencey. I'm a little creative.
Love it.
Not really nailing either one, really, but maybe it works for the product manager role.
I love that. I love that. Well, both unique stories. Great to get to know you a little bit more. But let's dive into it, actually. So I think the reason everyone is here today, want to know about the future of sales, the future of Sales Navigator. And so I want to actually set the context here. There's two big trends that we are seeing. One is around the macroeconomic environment. I think there's a lot of uncertainty that's happening. It varies from industry to industry, but we're hearing more and more that selling is just really tough. And then the second is around AI, and specifically the rise of generative AI. It seems like, it may have come out a while ago, but we're still in the early innings here, in the early days of generative AI. And so with those two pieces of context, the uncertain macroeconomic environment, the rise of generative AI, would love to hear from you what you think the future of sales looks like. And John, let's start with you on this.
Yeah, who knows, right? Because things are moving so fast right now, it's kind of hard to keep up. But my vision of what the future of sales looks like, I use Iron Man and Iron Woman and Minority Report as the two versions to visualize this, because you have the person, right? And everybody talks about relationships and how important those are. And that's great. But if you think of Tony Stark as Iron Man, right? As a human being, he has everything. He's good looking, he's rich, he's super smart, right? He's got the trifecta. But if he goes out and fights all these aliens, he's gonna get killed, right? So what does he have to do? He has to create the suit. And the suit's great, but without Jarvis, the AI, the suit's kind of just a chunk of metal. And so if you think of the human plus the tech plus the AI, you can start to envision Iron Man, Iron Woman. And then if you put Minority Report in there, where, I don't know if you remember the movie, but he had these gloves on and he was in front of these screens where he was kind of just swiping things left and right. I genuinely think that we're going back to, full cycle sales, where the sales professional is going to be staring in front of a single pane. And instead of trying to figure out, who should I talk to today? We're going to be having information given to us. Be like, John, you need to call so-and-so. And by the way, you don't need to email them, you need to call them, because they just did these 5 things and their company just did this and they just posted that. And when you call them, make sure that these are 3 snippets of things that you mention, because here's some relevant information for you. So I think it's going to be that kind of that last mile of sales professionals. Let tech do all the heavy lifting. Let it do all the research. Let it even write the emails. Let it even come up with the presentations. But right before you engage with the human, that's where you have to put that human factor in. And I think that's one thing I picked from Gary Vaynerchuk a few years back in 2017 when I saw AI come out and write an email better than I had ever written. And I was talking to him and he said, and I was like, Gary, where does this leave us? I'm like, my training is based off of this thing. Like, what, like I'm now replaced. And he goes, don't worry about it. He goes, again, exact same thing. He said, don't let the tech do all the heavy lifting, but be the last mile. And that's the thing I want people to remember is like, as long as there's a human buying, like once computers start buying from computers, then we're in trouble, I think. But as long as there's a human on the other end purchasing something, there needs to be that human element. But we just need the technology to give us so that we can be as valuable as possible in that interaction.
Yeah, the human-centered piece is incredibly, incredibly important. Monica, I would love your take too.
Yeah, I think it's similar in a lot of ways. We're thinking about how do we help leverage technology and products to enable sellers to be more effective, more efficient, and hopefully make buying and selling more delightful on both sides. Yeah. My paradigm for thinking about it, I need to lean more into the filmography. got some things to watch. But I think of the arts and the science. Yep. And technology is so well placed, to your point, John, to like crush the science. Yep. The predictive algorithms, knowing what matters where, piecing it together, so that it can enable the humans to spend less time on these repetitive tasks and trying to read the tea leaves and more time on that art of what's truly human and understanding what matters, approaching the conversation, negotiating on both sides. So I think it's that view of how can technology help nail that piece of it.
And to jump in on that real quick, we've all heard the stat that sales reps only spend like, 37% or 27% of their time actually selling. And if you look at all the other areas that they spend their time on, updating CRM, doing research and all that is all stuff that AI can take care of for us. So if we can actually use that technology to give the sales rep back the time to spend engaging with the customer, it's a win-win across the board.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, I just want to follow up, John. You spent a lot of time coaching, sales organizations and trying to elevate everyone to become a top performer. So I'm curious, you've been around LinkedIn for a while. I think you were one of our first 50,000 members on LinkedIn. What do you actually think that the role that LinkedIn could play is in this future of sales that you're describing?
I'm in a massive role, quite frankly. I mean, I think that the relationships are there. People just don't know how to leverage them well enough. And I think that I always talk about how sales, it's about, I have this blog post that I wrote called Sell to 20%. It's my belief that when people buy things, they only buy 10 to 20, or they only use 10 to 20% of the functionality, whatever they buy. And that's how I believe people buy. LinkedIn is a perfect example of that. Most people only use 10 to 20% of the functionality of whatever LinkedIn is. And there's so much insights into that platform as far as relationships and engagement and branding and everything else, because I mean, let's not forget personal branding. Forget about the relationship component of this, but the personal branding side of this is going to be just exponentially more important moving forward because people aren't going to know who to trust, right? With the technology, it's like, where is this information coming from? Like, ChatGPT, is that information real? So they trust people. And so if you build your brands and you become a trusted brand, it's all melding together, marketing, sales, and everything together. And that's why I think LinkedIn is positioned so well to address almost every aspect of that: marketing, sales, direct selling, soft selling, branding, and all of it. It's just surfacing that information and giving it to reps in a way that they can use it.
Yeah, that's great. And to that point around building relationships and surfacing those insights, I'm curious, Monica, if you can bring to life some ways that LinkedIn and Sales Navigator can actually help sellers do that right now.
Yeah, it's something that we have observed as well. The top performers are using Sales Navigator in a way that helps them hone in on who those hidden allies, who can really be the right people they need to know to be able to serve their customers or acquire new customers. So one feature that we launched recently, Relationship Explorer, it's really trying to bring that front and center to remove the effort it takes to get to, hey, who are my hidden allies? Who do I have an intro? John, you know someone from X and Y and Z. Maybe they're a past customer. They have other affinity for my company. So that's an example of how we're using AI to help make that so much easier so the seller doesn't need to know what to look for. It's all right there for them so they can dig in and start building those relationships.
I love that.
That's great. That's great. So let's start transitioning to thinking about not just the future of sales, but the future of Sales Navigator. So both of you have basically mentioned we're at this really unique inflection point when it comes to sales. So Monica, maybe we start with you here. How are you thinking about reimagining Sales Navigator in this new environment?
Yeah, we're really focused on how can we simplify the work that it takes to be effective in selling and effective in using Sales Navigator, and how that can drive adoption across reps. We're also focused on how can AI enable us to augment the work that reps are doing to drive that additional effectiveness. And finally, how can we automate some of those tasks, John, that you were talking about, to really drive efficiency, get their time out of the doldrums and into the more value-added time with customers. And you'll see pieces of that, would love to share a bit more, but you'll see pieces of that coming to life across the product experience, from how am I prospecting to how am I finding leads, building relationships, as well as account research and so forth.
That's great. I'm actually really excited for this first piece that we're going to share here. I love those themes, actually. I love the themes around simplification, augmentation, automation, and how AI is going to help us across the board there. So maybe we can touch on that first piece, which is simplification. I would love to hear about what's coming down the pipeline for that.
Yeah. A big area that we're focused on is how can we make it so much easier to find leads in Sales Navigator. So whether it's prospecting for new business or growing your existing relationships. We know there's so much value that already exists within our search tool, and we're using AI to create an AI-assisted search. So imagine you can just, instead of having to know what's there, type in, hey, find me marketing leads on the East Coast. They'll be presented, and then the tool also prompts further, hey, Monica, did you know you've got some past customers? Why don't you focus on them first? And it actually drives and guides the end user to find those right audiences without them having to know what to look for. So really excited about that one. Actually, today we have our first external customers in private beta, and looking forward to learning and building with them as well.
Awesome. Yeah, the feature of the chat is in the search is great, but it's the suggestions. Because again, a lot of people don't know what they don't know, right? LinkedIn, you have so many different search fields of things that you can boil down to, but a lot of the novices don't understand that. And so if you can get to a point where it's coaching you, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you thought about this? And it gets them closer and closer and closer to that real relationship. Because what's inherently frustrating for everybody is when somebody reaches out to a connection that isn't really a connection. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, John, I see you're unconnected too. And it's like, well, I don't know that. But if you can get me down to, no, John, I know you have a strong connection because of these things and because of that. And there's a real reason now to connect. That's the key. Because I think the key ultimately is always about giving somebody a reason to reach out. And a relevant reason to reach out. Not just because we're connected, not just because you went to the same school as I did, but there's a genuine, based on what's happening in your business or the connections that we have, there's a real reason that we should connect. And that's why I love the chat feature, the search feature of it, and the suggestions. It's fantastic, what I saw at least. So.
That's great. And I'm curious, if you are a sales leader and you work with a lot of sales leaders, John, what kind of impact would this have at a sales organization? How should they be thinking about this feature as it applies to their sales team?
Yeah, I think it's a great transition from what we've all been exposed to, which is ChatGPT, right? I think a lot of people are just still very novices with ChatGPT, but it showed us what's possible. It showed us that we can interact with technology like we would a human, you know what I mean? And just ask and being curious. And I think that's what I'm most excited about this. I don't love the, hey, give me the answer, because I don't want it to be the silver bullet. I don't want it to tell me exactly what to say. I want it to prompt my curiosity. And if it can prompt my curiosity and help me learn, so that when I reach out to these people, it's not just because I have a pitch, because I'm selling something. It's because I have a genuine interest, I have a genuine curiosity. There looks to be a connection here. Let's have this talk. That to me is where I think is going to be great, because we've already been exposed to it. And so now integrating it into where we live and that single pane of LinkedIn, and the integration, I think that's where you're going to start to see some reps really start to get creative with what they're looking for and the connections that they're making.
That's great. Well, I want to move us on. I know we've got a few more capabilities to cover. So you mentioned augmentation, right? And using AI to help augment and drive rep effectiveness. I think productivity is like the name of the game, particularly in this environment. So I'm curious if there's anything you can share around that, Monica. What's coming down the road there?
Yeah, two things we're working on that I'm really excited about. And I think we've heard great feedback from our customers as well. The first one we're calling Account IQ. And imagine you're heading into a meeting, maybe it's with a prospect, and today the best reps are spending a fair amount of time before those interactions researching, hey, what's been in the news recently? What are their priorities, pain points, all these pieces, kind of to what you were talking about earlier, John, to come in with that context and relevance. So what Account IQ is doing is it's bringing together all these top insights about a company and creating a one-stop place where sellers can go to get that intelligence. It brings in insights from across the web, trusted sources to help outline, here are their pain points, here's their top challenges, revenue. And it also weaves in some unique LinkedIn insights, like what's the executive team? What are they talking about? What's top of mind that they're posting about and engaging on LinkedIn? Or even what are some of the workforce changes? Where are there areas of growth within a company, which obviously can be a great signal that they're investing in a certain area. So really excited about this and how our own reps are already using it to prep for discovery calls and so forth. And it really brings that time that the best sellers are doing and collapses it down and enables more folks to show up really informed to build that trusted partnership. The other one I'll just touch on is we call it relationship map. Obviously, mapping out a relationship and understanding, hey, how do different folks fit together? Who do I need to know is really valuable. And with that relationship mapping on LinkedIn, what's unique is, hey, we can flag when things are changing. Did someone depart the company and you need to get on top of finding who the next person is that you should be getting to know, and it's able to also bring that information back into the CRM. And so those are a couple of pieces that we're working on, excited to help our customers really be more effective, and those reps be more effective in strategizing a deal through to preparing for engagements with them.
I love it. The account IQ is my favorite, by the way. So based on what I've seen, the map is fantastic. I like visualizing, so I love the map version of it. So you could view an org chart, because everybody has challenges building org charts. You hear them talk all the time. It's like, well, what's the account map look like? And reps have a really hard time putting that together. And it's usually on some other system that is not dynamic, and it sits there and it ages out. And so to visualize that and then be able to collaborate on that is fantastic. But account IQ, that to me is going back to your point of like saving us time, because for instance, I used to train, and I'll be training on something different, but I used to train reps on how to prepare for meetings and have a checklist, right? Before you go into a meeting, you should have a checklist. And what's on that checklist? Well, you should go look at their background, their LinkedIn history, who they're connected to, any news and events, any connections that you might have within the account, any recent trends in the industry that are happening. And that takes, for a good rep, it takes a solid 10, 15, if you want to do it right and prepare for a good meeting, it takes a solid 15, 20, 30 minutes just to get those snippets together. And you're going between 15 different sources to get that information. And so now to all have that in one pane right there, so I can just jump in and scan that through and be ready for a meeting within 2 to 5 minutes. That one's my favorite.
And how often are reps actually doing that? I know
the first she said the best reps. What she put a caveat around the whole thing. The best reps are doing this, right? And that is absolutely true. There's probably only 10 to 20% of the sales population out there that cares enough. Most of them are going through the motions, and most of them show up and they ask their typical BANT questions, and then they drone through their demos. But the beauty of what LinkedIn, I think, is bringing to the table is it's actually almost forcing the issue and making it so easy that if you don't prepare, it's almost insulting at this point. I quite frankly, I think one of the most insulting questions or statements you can say to somebody in a meeting is, tell me about your business. Companies spend millions of dollars on marketing and everything to tell the world about their business. And the first thing you're gonna do with my most valuable asset, which is time, is say, tell me about your business, when you could just look at it on LinkedIn and figure it out and then ask contextual questions around that. To me, that's the key. It's like, I don't want to know everything about your business. I don't want to come with some assumptions. I want to come with some curiosity. I want to be like.
I guess I'm curious, John, if that's the most frustrating question, what do you see as being the most effective questions that someone can ask to open up that conversation?
Well, I'll give you an easy one. Everybody let's go back to the sell to the 20% thing that I brought up earlier. I fundamentally believe that is it. Like, people don't care about the entire solution. They care about the 20% that is most relevant. And so how do you get there? Well, you have to align with priorities, right? So like when your CEO stood up in the beginning of the year and said, these are the 3 things we got to do to be effective this year. If I can't tie my solution to 1 or 2 of those, good luck selling anything of significance. The problem is for the majority of my career, the way I would get there is by asking dumb questions like, tell me about your priorities, or statements. And I would usually get, when asking a generic or making a generic statement like that, I would get generic answers. Well, revenue. Well, let me show you how it could impact your revenue, right? Now, I do my research on what that persona cares about, what's going on in that industry, and instead of saying, hey, tell me about your priorities, I can say something like, hey, we're typically dealing with CFOs in the financial services industry, and they're telling us that right now, going into this market, their top priorities are X, Y, and Z. Are those yours? Even if the answer is no, at least it showed that you know a little bit. Like, I don't believe you need to be the industry. I don't believe you need to be the product expert in sales. I don't. I think you need to know enough to be curious. And then ask questions to uncover that, to show a person that you care. But you have to show them you care first. And if you don't put in the effort to learn at least the basics of that role, that industry, what's going on in that company, I think this year is the year that the zero value interaction between sales and customer goes away. The tolerance from the customer's perspective of no value and a sales rep just asking basic questions and droning through a demo, because when you can get more value out of jumping on a ChatGPT and asking it questions about somebody's product or service than you can a sales rep who's going to drone through dumb questions, and what's the value of a sales professional, right? The value is that curiosity, is getting them to think, is asking them the questions that they didn't even know they should be asking. And that's what I think the power of LinkedIn can surface to us in a way that almost forces the issue. You know what I mean? It's now no longer, because there's no excuse anymore. There really isn't. Yeah. You have to be so lazy to not have, like with what I saw, like you literally have to not even care. And if you don't care, I don't know what to tell. I don't know what to tell you.
I love it because it goes to this concept of deep sales, which is something that we introduced last year, and it's really around how can we help provide insights to reps to actually up-level their conversations and elevate them. And now with Account IQ, you're going to put that information right at their fingertips with one click. With Relationship Map, you're going to have the ability to identify the right people in the buying circle and then understand what matters to them as well. So. I think it all ties together and makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, quality over quantity. The AI can take care of the quantity. People need to take care of the quality.
Yep, great. I did want to touch on that last piece. So you had 3 that you talked about. You talked about simplification, you talked about augmentation, and now automation. And obviously efficiency is also very critical nowadays. So curious if you can share what's coming down the road there.
Yeah, I think what we're imagining is how can we take something like lead finding and be able to create a much more streamlined workflow. And what we've really heard from customers is, hey, I get that value out of Sales Navigator, but how can you get into my other places where my reps are working? So really excited we shared last week our partnership with HubSpot and integrating with that CRM. And we're also exploring ways to bring some of those core use cases directly into the CRM through an embedded experience. So you don't need to come to Sales Navigator to find, that relationship explorer that brings those leads front and center. It's right there where reps are spending their time, and looking forward to how that can help really create a lot more value delivery for customers and just make it easier to adopt these deep sales habits that we're all kind of talking about.
Yeah. And so to that point, I think when we're talking about automation, we're talking about automating key tasks. And John, I've heard you talk about, the transition that sales organizations might face in the world of AI. So I'm curious if you can share more about that and what to expect going forward.
Yeah, there's a big transition going on right now, obviously. I think the question is all these tasks that we've been teaching these reps how to do, right? We've been forcing them to, do all these administrative things with all this technology and taking them away from sales. And quite frankly, I think we've lost sight of the fundamentals of sales because we've tried to over-engineer the process. And so now by using AI to really empower the sales rep to have better conversations, we're in a position where for the reps who care, I think they're going to be unbelievably valuable. There's a really interesting stat that came out recently from Gartner that said they averaged out Gen Xers, boomers, and millennials, and it was B2B buyers. And they said on average, 43% want a rep-free experience. Rep-free experience. And that's just going to get worse with Gen Z coming into the mix, right? That's the scary part. The good part is that of those 43% that wanted a rep-free experience, they had a 23% higher regret rate. So they regretted their decision more when they didn't have a sales rep involved, which shows that we add value. It's just, where is that value coming from? And I think it's just different now. And so figuring out ways to transition through this and educate reps with the technology, as opposed to that augmentation as opposed to replacement. I think everybody's talking about replacing sales reps and that type of thing. And I think that's a fool's errand. I don't think that's the way it should be done anyways. But it's giving them the tools so that they can do what a human does, which is relate to people, have empathy, care, get them to be curious. Those are the things that I'm really excited to hopefully unleash for a much larger part of the population that has probably been stuck with doing too many administrative things and having to bounce through different systems. So having Sales Navigator meet me where I am, and by the way, I'm a HubSpot user, so I'm thrilled with it, is exciting because, you have to meet people where they are these days. Some people love living in Sales Navigator, other people love living in HubSpot, other people love living in there, and if you can meet them where they are and avoid the bouncing around to 15 different platforms, I think you're putting yourself in a great position to be successful moving forward here.
That's great. So we just got a few minutes left here. I did want to just survey both of you. I'm going to make you pick favorites. So we've covered a lot here, right? We've talked about AI-assisted search. We've talked about Account IQ, which will help with account research. We've talked about relationship map and the ability to integrate with CRMs as well. We've talked about new HubSpot integration and embedded experiences that we're going to be providing for HubSpot, for Dynamics, for Salesforce. So if you could help just pick a favorite here, what really excites you? Monica, we're going to start with you since you're owning this.
Neil, I love you clarifying prioritization always. I'm really excited across the board, but I think forced to choose a favorite child, I'd say the assisted search, the AI assisted search that we're working on. There's just so much magic in LinkedIn helping connect a seller with the right person on the other side. And couldn't be more excited about the potential for this to unlock a lot more valuable connections between buyers and sellers, make it a lot easier for the sellers to get that value. And as a technologist, it's a really cool time to be building with technology that completely changed the game. Cards in the air on what we can do. So just see so much opportunity there. So
that's right.
That'd be mine. How about you?
Account IQ. There's no question about it. I love all the other stuff. I think it's all fantastic, but the Account IQ, just the simple ability to combine LinkedIn data with the external sources, because I'd say all these other external sources that I use don't include the LinkedIn data. I have to go and get the LinkedIn data and figure out how to do that. So to have that all surfaced up to me in one single pane is what I'm fired up about. So
that's great. Yeah. That's great. I'm not, being asked a question, so I don't have to share what my favorite is. We're going to save that for a different place. But listen, across the board, excited about what's coming in the next year. Yeah. So I just want to close out with one last question, which is, what is the so what of this, right? What is one thing that you would like to have folks take away as we share our roadmap, share our vision on the future of sales? And John, maybe we start with you and then we'll close with Monica.
Yeah, I just get involved. I mean, that's what, there's people who are still sitting on the sidelines and thinking, this isn't going to affect them or whatever, my way is fine and everything else. And the analogy that I use is the movie Hidden Figures. So if you remember the movie Hidden Figures, there was all these women who were called computers, right? And they were handwriting, calculations to get us to the moon, which blows my mind in the first place. And I remember the head of the computers was walking in the main office and there was a huge IBM mainframe that got installed. And she looked at that and said, oh, she's like, that's gonna replace us. And she had two choices. One choice was to go back to her team and say, we gotta get smarter, we gotta be better at doing math because we gotta beat that thing, right? Or the second option is, which is what she did, she picked up the manual and she started learning how to use it. She started learning how to maintenance it, how to turn it on. And so when the IBM engineers came to turn it on, they didn't even know how to use the thing. And so what she had done, she not only taught herself, but she brought it back to her team and taught her team how to use all of it. And so when they turned it on and the engineers couldn't even figure it out, those computer women went from being 100% replaceable to indispensable. And that to me is the mentality we have to have, is just pick up the manual. Start playing around with this stuff. People always ask me, what's the best way to get started with ChatGPT? I say, that's a great question to ask ChatGPT. Go into ChatGPT and say, I'm a 47-year-old man, I live in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm the CEO of a sales training organization, I have no idea how to use ChatGPT, give me some advice. And I said just the same thing with the chat features and the search features in LinkedIn. Just get involved and start using it, because you will wake up one day and get replaced if you don't.
Love that. Monica, how about you?
I think I'd come back to similar themes, but when we survey sellers, 2/3 of them are anticipating this going to be using more AI and AI playing more role in their day-to-day in the next 6 months even. So I think we're already feeling for a lot of that audience, that drive, and would just echo the sentiment of like, be curious and try new things. And I think we already see how resourceful, how entrepreneurial sellers are already. So just lean into that, and don't be afraid of the unknown.
Yeah,
So.
be curious. I love it.
I love that. So with that, we'll have to leave it there, as that's all the time we have today for this topic. I'd like to thank Monica and John for taking part in our show today. Thank you so much, and sharing your expertise.
Yeah.
I also appreciate John starting with the film analogy, ending with the film analogy as well. We hope you're all excited here to see what's coming down the road with LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So thank you so much. Happy selling, and I'll pass it off to Sahar.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Neil, Monica, and John. As a sales leader who uses Sales Navigator every day, I personally cannot wait for a new relationship map and account IQ. My goodness, it's going to be a game changer. So one more thing to add, I think from our discussion here, there's so much goodness in this conversation, but a couple key things that really stood out, which is 20% of our best salespeople really are spending that time selling. So if we can actually automate that process through account IQ and take that time back, it's a huge game changer. I am so excited about that. So folks, that's a wrap.